More than 582,000 humans are experiencing homelessness today in America. They are living on the sidewalk, in tents and in cars, and at public transit stops in cities and towns across the U.S. and right here in Tulsa. From 2010 to 2021, the United States built 10 million housing units. From 2022 through the end of this year, in just 2 years, the power of the American economy will have built 900,000 rental housing units. And in the same 2 years, homelessness will have reached the record count. The United States has 142 million housing units, and 922,000 are vacant. So why do we have homelessness in America? Since the era of the Great Depression, our nation has struggled to house people. The research estimates that on any given night during the 1930s, over 400,000 people were unhoused, as nearly 2 million were migrating across the country after losing jobs and then homes. In 1937, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development was created to, quote, clear the slums by establishing housing in places where the unhoused would congregate. And this created what we know today as public housing. I grew up in public housing, as did my parents and grandparents before me. Public housing is not housing of choice or opportunity or connected to services in the economy. These isolated, disinvested, and forgotten neighborhoods on the outskirts of most cities and towns allowed a vicious generational cycle of poverty to take hold. Subsequent economic downturns in the 1930s, 60s, 80s, and 2000s fostered homelessness into the future, creating what we are experiencing today. But our image of who is unhoused is false. So let's look at the data. Of the over 500,000 unhoused persons today, only 19% are struggling with mental health and addiction. 7% are veterans who fought in our wars abroad, are entitled to benefits, yet they have to fight for shelter they can afford here at home. 30% are a combination of seniors, kids in our schools, youth aging out of foster care, so they're too old or too young to pay the rent and earn income, or our economy is simply out of reach. 44% of unhoused persons are working, most commonly in the delivery, warehousing, and retail sectors. So they are earning income, paying taxes, yet they are unhoused because the price of housing has far exceeded their incomes. And millions more, nearly 14 million Americans, are at immediate risk of experiencing homelessness, meaning they spend over 50% of their monthly incomes on housing costs. They are one missed paycheck, one missed rent payment, one COVID hospital bill away from being unhoused. Nearly 14 million Americans, or the combined population of 12 states, are at immediate risk of experiencing homelessness because the cost of housing has far outpaced their incomes. In America, we have homelessness because at the center of our national housing policy is finance, not people. Because housing is a commodity in America. When we talk about housing affordability, we are talking about the price for purchasing a product at the cost of goods sold. Housing is not a human right, but we can still get this right. We can use the power of American capitalism to create a social good in housing all humans. We can redirect the funding to create more housing affordable and available to more families. We can end homelessness today and the high risk of homelessness tomorrow by applying the lessons learned of nearly 40 years of public housing policy that demonstrated shelter alone today may end homelessness, but concentrated deprivation and poverty will foster homelessness into the future. We can finance for the greater good to create housing in communities of choice, opportunity, connected to services and the economy at all levels of affordability. This may sound too good to be true, but it is already happening in small pockets around the country and right here in Tulsa. Since 1986, Congress authorized a tax credit to incentivize households with high incomes and high taxes owed to invest in housing development for low-income persons and families. Let's talk about housing development. Today, the price for building a one-bedroom, one-bathroom unit, including all costs of materials, land, labor, and of course lawyers, is roughly $250,000. Here in Tulsa, a similar unit costs about $200,000, whether it's new construction or substantial rehabilitation, and to maintain the building as a decent, safe physical structure. Because housing is a commodity, where in the housing development transaction you extract profit is a critical part to determining affordability. The housing market draws from other markets for bricks, wood, iron, and cement, and these costs are the same, whether you're building a unit that is rent-free or luxury rental. Therefore, a developer can build two identical units and rent them out at two different prices if the developer can reduce the fixed costs for constructing the units. Then, higher rents in Unit A can be used to help support lower rents in Unit B. Here's an example. A developer wants to build a 100-unit new construction apartment building. The developer's cost is roughly $25 million, based on the $250,000 per unit average. The developer will contribute $5 million and take out a mortgage for $20 million. Then apply high rents across all 100 units to pay back the debt and extract profit. By using the tax credit incentive program, the same developer for the same 100-unit apartment building can generate $10 million in tax credits based on current average credit pricing. With $10 million in tax credits, the fixed cost for constructing up to 50 of the 100 units is therefore substantially less. More tax credits equals less debt equals less rent needed to fund the project. Then the developer takes out a mortgage for just $15 million and pays back that debt by higher rents in the other 50 units. All 100 units are built to the same quality standard in the same community, but at two different rent levels. The developer can then source additional funding from HUD Housing Choice Vouchers, Medicare, Medicaid, foundation funds, or city funds to further reduce the rents in those 50 units, making them more affordable and available to a broad spectrum of families. And the profit for the developer, the profit is sourced from the tax credit investor, not the rents. A mixed financing approach to mixed income housing development can help create the units we need to house our seniors, kids in schools, youth aging out of foster care, our honorable veterans, and our workforce. The tax credit incentive program has also demonstrated that it can help finance the creation of permanent supportive housing, which is housing provided at nearly zero rents, as well as intensive wraparound on-site services for those struggling with mental health and addiction. 14 states now have state tax credit programs to layer on top of the federal program to further expand affordability, and Oklahoma is one of those 14 states. Oklahoma has the debt and tax credit capacity to help fund the creation of over 1,000 affordable units a year. Local governments around the country have instituted numerous programs to help replicate this model of mixed financing for mixed income housing development, to subsidize rents to make more units available to more families at all levels of income. By working together, living together, and financing for the greater good, we can end homelessness today, tomorrow, and right here in Tulsa. Thank you.